What's going on, everybody? V-Lion here, and welcome back to another episode of Kerbal Space Program. So, since last episode, I went to the Mun a few more times just to collect some more science from the different biomes and to do some contracts, and I managed to get enough money to upgrade a few pieces of my Kerbal Space Center, especially the research and development. I upgraded it to the maximum level. And that also unlocked a few biomes inside the Research and Development Center, which led to even more science. And before we head to Minmus, I want to show you a quick trick that you can do in order to save some money, some time, maybe not exactly time, but you can save the amount of trips you take to the Mun in order to do different contracts. So here we are, we're at the Mun, and as you can see, I'm circularizing my orbit, but also tilting it so that it's a 90-degree inclination. And you can basically do that by pointing in between your anti-normal and your retrograde vector. You can play around with your maneuver node in the editor just to see how your orbit will change. And what that's going to do is it's going to put me in a perfect orbit to visit every spot in the Moon in one trip. Now, for those keen-eyed among you, you can actually see that the Mun is rotating beneath my orbit, meaning like right now I'm doing a crew report. I just passed over the right spot, and I'm going to pass over the next spot in just a moment. You'll see I warp to that area, and it's just in the right spot. But there are a lot of spots in the Moon, and I'm pretty low in my orbit to be able to time accelerate fast enough. But there is a solution to that, which I'm going to show you right now. So back at the KSC, we enter the tracking station, and what we can actually do here, because we're not directly controlling a vessel, is we can increase the simulation speed, the warp speed, as fast as we want, meaning we can just let the Moon rotate as far as we want in order for those little zones to be directly underneath our orbit. And once the zones we need to study are too far away from our orbit, we head back to the tracking station and time accelerate again. All we need to do is wait for the first one to come underneath our orbit, and then slow down our time acceleration just to make sure, bring our craft nice, easy, and right over the zone, control our craft, find our thermometer, and then log the temperature. And we keep doing that until we've cleared every single zone on the Mun. And instead of constantly changing our orbit and doing multiple missions to the Mun, we just do one mission. It takes several days in-game time, but for us it only takes about 15 minutes. And we get from that a lot of money, and it's a very easy way to do a lot of the contracts that you get. Back in the VAB, we're just upgrading our lander with a new antenna to give it enough range to reach once we get to Minmus, some extendable solar panels, a brand new Probodobodyne Octo 2 probe core, and a tiny heat shield to protect the probe core from overheating during liftoff. So at this point, I decided I needed to remove those small fuel tanks on the lander just to make it a bit lighter. The problem that a lot of people run into in Kerbal Space Program is when they're trying to get more Delta V out of their rockets, they just stick more boosters on. And even though that gives you more fuel to work with, it also raises the weight of the craft, which lowers the thrust to weight ratio, which actually makes the craft less efficient. So I could keep stacking boosters on this craft, and it wouldn't affect the range too much. So in the end, I decide that to remove these fuel tanks on the side, restrut everything, and it still has enough Delta V to get to Minmus. And Minmus is fine because it has a very small mass, so the gravity is very weak there, and you really don't need a lot of Delta V to get around. So here we are at the launch pad, taking advantage of some mech jeb to help us in our takeoff, just because Minmus is at an inclined orbit relative to Kerbin. So in order to waste the least amount of delta V, it helps to actually make sure that you match planes with Minmus before you have to circularize your orbit, and it'll prevent you from needing to make too many adjustments to your orbit and wasting fuel. So we're just going up at a small incline so that when we actually get up above the atmosphere, our orbit will already be at about a 6-degree inclination, and from there it'll be much easier to get an encounter with Minmus. You can see here lots of heating happening, which makes me even more glad that I stuck the heat shield on top of the probe core just to prevent it from being destroyed from the high temperatures. And then we managed to circularize, and we still have more than enough fuel left in our tanks to take us all the way to Minmus. So here we are just fine-tuning our orbit to match Minmus's inclination, and it doesn't require much delta V at all. And then we go ahead and we set up an encounter with Minmus, and we try to get a nice low orbit just to make things easier on us. And we don't really need a lot of delta V just because we were so efficient, although it still does take 800 some odd delta V in order to get there. We still have a little bit left in our tank, which is actually going to be even more than enough to help us circularize afterwards. Here we are extending our antenna to give us access to ComNet. So here we are at Minmus, and we actually managed to do our burn and still have fuel left over, and we're going to attempt to use the rest of that fuel to help us land. The only problem we run into here is that our engine is so powerful and Minmus is so small that we actually end up changing our orbit's direction with our burn. And once we do that, you see our orbit's going backwards now. So for some reason our SAS switched from retrograde to just holding. So we switch back. We go to our retrograde again to get us burning in the right direction because we want to land in that flat green patch down there, the flats. And so we managed to do that. We changed the direction of our orbit. There, you see how the retrograde and prograde markers on our nav ball switched? That's because of the pressure we applied to the retrograde vector. There we see our center stage flying beneath us, about to crash into the surface. And because of all the different changes we had to make in our orbit, instead of trying to head to the flats just yet, we're just going to go ahead and head straight down to the Midlands. And it's quite easy to land here, just because the descent speed is so slow and it's super easy to slow down. And most of Minmus is relatively flat, so this is a pretty easy place to land on. We're just letting ourselves drift down. And here we encounter a small problem in the fact that we still have about 10 meters per second of horizontal speed. So as you can see, while we're going down, we're still falling forward, as it were, which isn't as big of a problem on Minmus as it is in other places, just because the gravitational pull is so weak. So as you can see, we're about to hit the ground. So we touch down and we actually start to skid along the ground and tip over. But again, because the gravitational forces on Minmus are so weak, we can actually use our reaction wheels to stop ourselves from flipping over and right ourselves up. So we have enough force in our reaction wheels in this low gravity to actually counteract the force that's tipping us over. So there we are. We're landed in the Midlands. We take out Bob Kerman. He goes out and he plants a flag. So here I realize I have a ton of delta V left over in my lander, more than enough to get back to Kerbin, so I decide to try and do some biome hopping, just launching myself a bit in the air and heading towards a different biome and landing there. I even managed to use Minmus's low gravity to my advantage by making my craft rotate so that my nav ball is more comfortable to navigate using just my reaction wheels. I don't even thrust upwards or anything. One of my legs is still touching the ground and I just rotate the craft around it. And that actually helps me align my craft so that all I have to do when I get up into the air is just point to the right, directly to the right. So here we are back in the map view, and I'm using MechJeb's landing assistant in order to help figure out where my craft is going to land. The red marker that you see in the map view is where I want to land and actually shows up as a target on my nav ball, whilst the blue marker is the landing prediction, shows where I'm going to land if I stay in my current position and don't do anything to change that. So I'm just slowly accelerating just to move the arrow. You can see I'm putting in just a little bit of delta V here. And I'm moving pretty easily through the air. There the arrow's going. And it just went past the red target, which is fine. So now all we have to do is wait. I actually make a mistake here and activate the landing autopilot, which messes things up just because the landing autopilot wants to try to get into an orbit first before it decides where's the best place to land. But in this case, it would be much easier for me to just land on my own, because all I have to do is have the marker land where I want it to land, and then just keep my craft pointed at retrograde and put in enough thrust to slow me down when the time comes. So here I actually take control back from MechJeb and decide that I can land this better than MechJeb can. And I go ahead and I burn retrograde just to bring my apoaps down. Also, burning retrograde kills your velocity basically. So I'm slowly burning just because I want to get the blue marker as close to the red marker as I can. I don't want to try and do anything too serious with it. There, it's directly on the red marker now. However, in the end, because you can't really zoom in that precisely, I don't land in the lesser flats, as you'll see in just a moment. So as you can see here, instead of landing in the lesser flats area, we've actually landed in the Minmus lowlands, which is a bit of an incline, But because this is Minmus and the gravity is very low, that's not really a problem for us. So here Bob gets out, he collects his science. I forget, in this case, to plant a flag, but afterwards, we get back into our lander, and we do another small biome hop over to the lesser flats. So as you can see here, all we really had to do is just fire thrusters, point yourselves in the right direction for a few seconds, and then start burning retrograde in order to kill our horizontal velocity, and then just ease down to the surface. We made a mistake here where we burnt retrograde a bit too much and had stability assist on instead of holding retrograde. So we switch back to holding retrograde, and we slowly ease ourselves down to the surface of the lesser flats. And then we have another biome collected. And after taking our thumbnail for the episode, I send Bob quickly over to the lowlands just to plant a flag. And then we get back to the lander and we head back home. So after reaching a low, stable Minmus orbit, we start burning away from Kerbin, and that actually gets us a trajectory back towards Kerbin. We just hit the prograde marker until we exit Minmus' sphere of influence, and then that puts us inside Kerbin's sphere of influence, and then all we have to do, we keep burning prograde until we actually lower our Kerbin periaps enough that we actually get captured in its atmosphere. We actually go ahead and we use MechJeb's very nice maneuver node editor in order to just not go overboard with our prograde adjustments. You see we exit Minmus' sphere of influence, and then we keep burning prograde, and our periaps to Kerbin keeps on getting down there. It's past the Mun now, and we want it to go further, and it's really not taking a lot of delta V. It's taking about, at this point, maybe 100 and something delta V. So here we are just using MechJeb's maneuver node editor so that we can make sure that our burn lands us with a periaps that is inside Kerbin's atmosphere, which is just going to help us conserve some delta V, and also going to make sure that we don't fly away from Kerbin again or get caught in the Mun's gravity or back in Minmus' sphere of influence. So we just warped our maneuver node. So here I'm just demonstrating the wrong way to return to Kerbin from a moon, and you can see that when I burn and make my apoaps rise towards Kerbin, then what it actually causes is me to leave Kerbin's sphere of influence. What we want to do is raise our apoaps away from Kerbin. That's going to mean that our periaps is still within Kerbin's boundaries, so that's going to make it easier for us to get captured in Kerbin's atmosphere. And what that's going to do is it's going to slow us down even more. And once we get into Kerbin's atmosphere, it's going to cause our apoaps to lower as well. A safe bet is anywhere between 40 and 50 kilometers for our periaps. If we do it too low, then our craft's going to heat up way too much on re-entry. It's going to be way too steep. And if we do it too high, then we're not gonna be in the atmosphere long enough to burn off enough speed. We're basically going to skim through the atmosphere and then come right back out at a really high apoapsis, and then have to wait for another pass back into Kerbin in order to try to lower our apoapsis again. What ended up happening here was that I was time accelerating so fast that I actually shot straight through Kerbin's atmosphere without the physics engine taking effect. Meaning I just passed right through it and didn't lower my apoapsis almost at all. So then I just decided to burn a little retrograde to lower down my apoapsis manually, and then time accelerate back towards Kerbin's atmosphere. And that's when the re-entry process happened. So you can see here, we're just getting inside the atmosphere. Only about 40 more kilometers to go. What I do is I retract my solar panels, and I also retract my antenna, because those are two things that will very easily break off in atmosphere. So I want to make sure those are tucked away nice and neatly. I have enough electric charge, and I also am close enough to Kerbin that my command pod's built-in antenna will be enough. Now I encountered a weird bug here where my SAS was just not working properly, so I just turned on MechJeb's Smart ASS in order to keep myself pointed at the retrograde, because that's probably the safest way to be pointing. That's usually where your most heat durable components are. And I also start burning, because as you can see my engine's starting to overheat, so I start burning retrograde in order to bleed off as much speed as I can, because I'm coming in very hot. We're under 40 kilometers already, and we don't want anything to explode. So I just keep burning. I burn all of my fuel as much as I can, and I'm actually inside Kerbin's sphere of influence now. I won't be able to escape. My apoapsis is inside the atmosphere, and my periapsis is basically going to cause me to hit the ground. I'm still burning up very hot and very fast. I'm burning off the last of my fuel now. And there, we managed to pass through the atmosphere, and everything's still intact, and I'm actually going to be able to land the whole lander. I won't have to do any separation. But here's where I actually start to lose control of the lander, so I just wait until my altitude and my speed are down low enough, and I deploy my parachutes to make sure I point upwards. there we go. The parachutes, though not fully deployed, are still bleeding off a ton of speed. We're rapidly losing speed, and we're dropping safely down to the Badlands. And there we go, our parachutes have deployed, and it's dropped us down to about 6 meters per second, which is totally enough for our lander legs to handle. And that's it, we've safely come back from Minmus to Kerbin. We definitely could have visited another biome because we had more than enough Delta V left over, and we basically used it just to slow our descent, which, if you're patient enough, you can actually return with a very small amount of Delta V and rely on burning off enough speed in the upper atmosphere in order to return to Kerbin. So here we are, we're landing. We're going to collect even more science because the Badlands is a biome we haven't visited yet. See right there, a lot of science. We're going to have Bob come out and get a surface sample and an EVA. He's going to go back in, and then we're just going to make sure we have everything and recover our vessel. And here we are back at the KSC, and we've earned a whopping 3,600 science, bringing our total up to 4,500, just an amazing amount. And here we are just recovering some of our lander stages, and we have enough science to unlock a lot of great stuff we can unlock. So that's the episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click that like button, click that subscribe button, hit that bell notification icon, and leave a comment down below telling me what you'd like to see next in my Kerbal Space Program series. And I will see you all next time. Peace.